Good evening, good evening, good evening. This is Pastor Hawkins. It is 6 p.m., and that means it's time for Wednesdays in the Word. I am so grateful for this opportunity to be with each of you, Antioch and friends, and all those who gather. What a great blessing it is for us to have this time together. So I want to invite you to come on in. Want to invite you to do that, and also let us know what your color is. I am mostly green. I've been struggling with a cold for the past few weeks or so, but I am mostly green, and I am excited about that. So come on in. I see some of you are already starting to come on in. It's good to be in you all's presence one more time. I'm grateful for that. Good evening, good evening, good evening. Alma Watson, uh, good evening, good evening. Glad that you are with us and saying hi to Lakana. What's happening, Stacia? You are green. I am mostly green as well. Green, wonderful, 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 wonderful. Green and focus, wonderful, wonderful. You got time to invite someone in to join us as we prepare to engage in study on this evening. I am excited. We last week we had our monthly fast and fellowship, and the week before that we had our annual business meeting. So it's been a couple of weeks since we have gathered for Wednesdays in the Word. And so I'm excited about the opportunity to come back and to be with you all. Lakana, hey, what's happening, my friend? What's happening, my friend? Glad that you are with us on this evening. What's happening? What's happening, Dee Dee? Glad that you are with us on this evening. Green with a slight migraine. Glad to be here. Love you all. We love you too, Dee Dee. So yeah, come on in, invite someone. There's always room for one more in the cyber sanctuary. So come on in. I'm mostly green. I'm mostly green. I'm about 80 to 85% green, which is pretty good. Which is pretty good. I'm about 80 to 85% green. So glad to be here and to be with you all. Again, we had a couple of weeks away. We had our annual business meeting, and then we had our monthly fast and fellowship. So the past 2 weeks, we did not gather for Wednesdays in the Word. So it is great to be able to be back. What a blessing it is to be back. Hey, there she is, the one and only Dr. Deacon Deirdre Denise McKinley. Wouldn't that be something if your last name started with a D?
Yeah, that would have been funny. Yep.
That would be something.
Well, my middle name, before you even get to the last name, you could have said, how did you greet me?
Dr. Deacon Deirdre Denise.
Yeah, Denise McKinley. Yeah.
Yeah.
What's a
Yep.
lot?
That's a lot. That's a lot of D's.
Yes, it is.
That is a lot of D's. Let's see what else is going on with the people. Mother is green, focused, ready to learn. Blue green, tired but feeling okay. And there's the update from Lakana. PT wore me out today. Well, Lakana, I hear you. 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 Well, I hear you. It bees like that sometimes. Sometimes PT just wears you out. And Miss Bessie, what a blessing that you are with us, green and focused. And we praying for you, Lakana. We praying for you. We praying that everything would get strengthened up and all doing what it's supposed to do. And that's what we are. That's what we're praying for. Let me put this invite up one more time so that if anyone else wants to join us on camera, that they are welcome to do so. There you go. Found it out. We with you, Lakana. We are with you. So there it is. If you want to join us on camera. Hold on. Oh, there we go. Uh, I spoke it into existence, y'all. Did y'all see that? I put the link to be on camera, and right then, someone else joined us on camera. It is First Lady of Antioch, former First Lady of the state of Nebraska. uh, say hi to the people. That's a Baptist thing. Come on and say hi to the people.
Hi, people.
Hi. Hi, person.
Awesome. That was not a Baptist greeting, but a Baptist greeting says something like,
Giving honor to God, all my brothers and sisters in Christ. I'm blessed to be here tonight.
there you go. There you go. that's more along the lines of a Baptist greeting. So I don't think I have any announcements on this evening. So I think we will get right to it. Are you ready? There you have it. There you have it. Everything that you need, it is in the Word of God. I am so grateful that our God loves us enough to ensure that we have access to His written revelation, that being the Word of God. That we don't have to guess, we don't have to wonder, we don't have to try and figure out what he wants us to know about him and how to live life. We can go to the Word of God, and in there, we are reminded of the values of the church. At least, let me backtrack. The Bible provides the foundation for the values that we hold true at Antioch: believing, being, belonging, and becoming. Hey, Karen, glad that you are with us. Hope all is well. And Karen, Karen. Oh, Karen. It is nice and sunny in the O today. How about that? It is nice and sunny in the O today. In fact, if it's nice and sunny in the O, it might be downright hot where you is at. And so we may actually finally have you beat on the weather report. How about them apples? So said a word about our values and grateful for the word of God. And here we go. In the 80s. Okay. I think we got you beat though. I'll take 70s over the 80s. I'll take upper 70s over the 80s. But it's close. It's close. It's close. I'm glad that you are with us in 80-degree temps because you could be somewhere else. So I'm grateful. So we're going to take some time and head down a different path temporarily. And here's why we're going to do that. We're going to do that, first of all, because we recently had our annual church business meeting, number 1. And hey, Aunt Johnny is with us. Good evening. Glad that you are with us. Green and grateful. What a great combination. We are so grateful. Hope all is well with you. So, number 1, we had our annual business meeting a couple of weeks ago and was able to share the spiritual direction of the church, amongst other things. And then, as things have continued to evolve with how I think about spiritual growth and discipleship, it's kind of been evolving for a while. And since we last talked about it, even in our last fast and fellowship, my thoughts have continued to evolve. And then the third thing is this Saturday, I guess that's one of our announcements. We have our quarterly leadership council meeting, and I'll be sharing more about our discipleship pathway. So just because of all of those things, I just think it would be a good time just to begin to go back over our thoughts, our approach, our processes with regard to discipleship. Because some things have been added, because in reviewing them and evolving them, I was able to identify some gaps, and I needed to address those. So we'll be sharing this at the leadership meeting this coming Saturday, but it's only an introduction. It's in Bible study where I can take a little bit more time and to go into more depth. So that's kind of where we are. So, starting out, we want to just acknowledge that faith is the development of faith is not a program, right? I went to a couple of trainings in the past couple of weeks, and one of them was on discipleship. DZ Cofield, one of our national consultants, was here in our city, and he talked about the difference between form and function. And form has to do with a method to get things done, and the function has to do with what is actually being accomplished. Or some people might refer to those things as the difference between the message and the method. Different ways of kind of saying the same thing. And one of the things that was communicated was that the form or the methods may change, but the function or the message or the mission remains the same. And so when I think about that as it relates to Antioch Baptist Church and the development of our spiritual lives, how our faith grows, it is more than just a program, because programs can change. Programs can become outdated. they can become ineffective because of changes within the church or changes, excuse me, outside of the church. Perfect example was the pandemic and how we reached out to the congregation. The method had to change, but the ultimate goal was the same, to try to reach out and provide care, but we had to learn to do it differently because of change. And so when we think about that in terms of our faith journey, we have to not focus in on just a program. We have to not focus in on just a program. We have to look at the big picture of where we're trying to go and then determine, is what we've been doing still effective to get there? And so, excuse me, those are just kind of some opening thoughts about the development of our faith. Our faith is not tied to a program. It's an actual journey that we go on, and it's the journey that is the main thing. And then how we get there may change depending on circumstances. And so that's just kind of an opening thought. And just a reminder that what I talked about at the beginning of the year was, if you recall, we had a conversation on church health. And health has to do with where we're headed. And I believe that healthy churches have three essential characteristics. They are missional. That means they focus on their purpose, which is found in the Great Commandment and the Great Commission. And so from our discipleship training at our equipping conference a couple weeks ago, our facilitator talked about the journey of how they view discipleship. And I really found it very helpful and interesting. He said he started out as discipleship was one of the things that the church offered. Like if they wanted this deeper dive in discipleship, there was an opportunity for that to take place. But it coexisted with all these other things that the church had to offer. And then they made the shift from discipleship being one of the things to discipleship being the main thing. And so then discipleship was in the middle, and there were still all these other doors that were available. It's just that discipleship became the main thing that the church offered. And then he talked about this final shift where discipleship became the only thing, and there was only one door entering into the church as opposed to many other doors. And just that visual to being one of the things, to being the main thing, to being the only thing, I think those shifts are fundamental in helping a church to pursue health. Because if making disciples is just as important as anything else in the church, then the church is not missional. It's not to say that there are other things that aren't necessary, but we're talking about importance here. And so healthy churches are missional. They focus on what Jesus commanded us to do. And they are transformational. They help people to become more like Jesus. And they are adaptable. They're willing to respond to changes in their internal and external environment. And so even before we start talking about discipleship, we have to even take a step back and talk about toward what end, toward the end of church health. And so that's where any effort to revitalize, any effort to implement strategies for church growth, they have to lead us toward the end of health. And growth, we depend upon the Lord for growth, because we can't make a person accept Christ. We can't make a person surrender fully unto God. We can try to create conditions where that's likely to happen. But if we did, then we would either be prideful or we would take on failures that weren't ours and frustrations that weren't ours. And so we start with church health. And then from there, we focus on discipleship. And here's my thought process. Because focusing on discipleship addresses all of those characteristics of a healthy church. It focuses on the mission because Jesus told us to love him with all our heart, soul, and mind, and to love our neighbor as ourselves. That's the great commandment. And then the great commission was to make disciples. So by focusing on discipleship, the church becomes more missional. It becomes more transformational. Through discipleship, people become more like Jesus. That's the ultimate goal. And the church has to become adaptable. You have to be able to respond to changes if we're going to make disciples. Making disciples in the pandemic looks different than making disciples before the pandemic, which looks different than making disciples after the pandemic, which looks different if you got a church of 2,000 versus a church of 75. If you've got paid staff versus volunteer staff, so being able to adapt to changes in the environment, internal and external, focusing on discipleship, forces us to be willing to be adaptable so that we can accomplish the goal regardless of the changing in internal and external environment. So I'm going to just kind of pause right there because I've kind of said a mouthful with regard to church health and focusing on discipleship, and make sure that we're on the same page. So does that make sense? Before we get to the point of talking about strategies, how we have to look at the big picture of where we're going and what our primary focus is to help us to be healthy. So let me know if we're on the same page. Give me a thumbs up, put something in the chat. If you're on camera, give me some feedback and let me know that we're all on the same page here. All right. So having said that, the Discipleship Pathway at the Antioch Baptist Church, which helps us to become missional, transformational, and requires us to become adaptable so that we can become healthy, and then pray that God brings the growth. We're focusing in on one primary thing that impacts all the other things. So, for instance, at our business meeting, we talked about the finances of the church, and we made some decisions about making an amendment to some of our guiding policies with regard to inactive members. And then after that, I updated the membership roster and sent some information out to our leaders about the number of people who are considered inactive. And so if we look at attendance, if we look at membership, if we look at finances, there are evidences and those external indicators of church decline at Antioch. And those are part of the external facts. There are some other internal facts, but those are external facts. And so the thought is, how do we address those? Do we address those by financial strategies? Do we address those by membership strategies? Do we address those by attendance strategies? And I would say in part, but the primary thing is to focus still on discipleship. Because people who become more like Jesus are more likely, that's more likely to show up in those areas, in those external areas where we are seeing some factual evidence of decline over the years. And so it will always start with our spiritual response. And as we focus on the thing that God told us to do, it is my position that we put ourselves in the best position to address those external things by focusing on the main thing, which is hopefully becoming the only thing. Does that make sense? Awesome. So, the discipleship pathway is a series of next steps. And I want to credit, I can't even think of the name of the guy that I want to credit at this time. Anyway, there's a guy, a Christian guy, who does a lot of discipleship and technology stuff. And I was listening to him. He was talking about next steps. And I thought that's interesting to me, but I didn't like his next steps. So I created my own. And those steps, long story short, got categorized into different phases. That's where our discipleship pathway came from. And this pathway, over the course of the past couple of years, have had different titles, but what the phases are never changed. So we've got 3 phases to our discipleship pathway: connect, decide, and grow. Connect, discover community, and experience God through relationship and engagement. Decide, make meaningful commitments to Christ's baptism and church membership, and grow. Live out your purpose, embrace care, identity, community, and maturity. So those are the 3 phases. It is designed to meet a non-believer and engage them in a journey to become a mature disciple, who is helping others to become disciples. So from stranger to disciple maker. And if we design a pathway that takes a person through initial contact as a stranger to a guest, to somebody who makes major decisions about Jesus, baptism, and church, and who begins a life of spiritual growth, to the point where they become mature and are able to lead other people through the same process. Our discipleship pathway is designed to go from the very beginning to the very end and to be able to do the same thing over and over and over. So it's like a continuous cycle of engagement through those 3 different phases of connect, decide, and grow. So any person at any point in time may come in at any point along that continuum. And so we need a pathway that's big enough to meet anybody wherever they are in that process. And we can't have one that just starts at membership, because we won't have something in place to lead them to that point. We can't have something that just starts when a person accepts Jesus Christ. We have to have a process that can meet any particular person wherever they are in that continuum, whether they be a believer or a non-believer, whether they are mature or not mature, whether they are a guest and a believer or a guest and a non-believer. And our pathway has to be able to meet any person wherever they are on that journey and be able to guide them to the next step. So we can't have a small pathway. We've got to have a broad pathway. And the pathway has to be able to reproduce itself with new people. So if it just ended and it didn't recycle back to helping someone else, then it would be incomplete, because our vision is not just to become disciples, but become disciples who make disciples. And so it's got to be broad enough to meet everyone. It's got to be circular enough to be able to go back through the process with another individual. And the connect, decide, grow are 3 phases, and then grow ultimately leads to new connect, new decisions, to new growth, to new connections, to new decisions, to new growth, on and on and on and on and on and on and on. And so I just want to make sure that we understand, the comprehensive nature of our strategy and why it has to be so broad. Thoughts, questions?
I like how it's all, like you said, it's broad, but it's very informational. So you know where to start with someone who's coming to you for the first time or has already made some decisions in their life. We have this plan. We have this flow plan is what we got. Of
Right.
knowing where to go with them. And how,
Right.
Mm-hmm. I like it.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. And also, by making it visible, the individual and the disciple maker both can see the same thing. And a person can see, oh, I'm here. What's the next step? And they can see that. And if you're the one that's playing the role of disciple maker or spiritual mentor, however you want to call it, I prefer disciple maker because it's more of a biblical term than a spiritual mentor. Then everyone's looking at the same page. And they'll say, oh, I'm here. And you'll know they're there. And both people will know what's next. And so, but it also had to be simple enough so it wasn't so super complicated and convoluted and people don't understand. And so the simplicity of connect, decide, grow, and the names should help people understand what's happening in those phases. So
I like that there's a place for everyone. Like you said, believer, non-believer, wherever they're at in the journey, there's a place for them to start. And it helps with the two kinds of people as well. There may be a person who really is on a fast track and is kind of self-guided in a sense, and they can read through and see here's what's next, and they don't necessarily have to wait for someone to tell them what's next or when they can go to the next. They can read it and follow through the steps themselves, or they can go through it with someone else. So either way, I mean, it just leaves a lot of open room for different people in different situations with different learning styles, and I think that's so important.
yes, thank you for sharing that. So here's what's new. Each phase has 3 clearly identified steps. That's what's new, and that was not always the case, and that was a gap. So I knew what was happening in each phase, but I didn't have a step 1, step 2, step 3 for each phase. And so that part is new because I realized there were some gaps that needed to be addressed. So connect, 3 steps, decide, 3 steps, grow, 3 steps. So flushing out what happens in each phase. Some of them were already there, and some of them needed some flushing out.
Pastor,
Yes.
may I ask the question as you were mentioning, as how did you come to understand that there were gaps? I mean, what made you, after having this all put together and everything, what did you see? Was it a situation, and then that made? I just want to know where your train of thought came from recognizing there's
Great
gaps.
question.
Mhm.
Real life. There were people at Antioch that were falling through the cracks. And then I was able to look at the pathway and I realized, oh, there wasn't a step for that. So tonight, I'm going to talk about one of the new steps in the connect phase and the fact that there was a gap. And I'm going to talk about those 3 gaps this Saturday. But there were places where people were falling through the cracks at Antioch, and there were places where people could potentially fall through the cracks at Antioch. And that led me to identify strategies and find out where they fit. And I realized, oh, well, no wonder I didn't have that as a step. So, for instance, one of the gaps where we've had guests who never made it to the decide phase, but there was no specific strategy to lead them. It was kind of left up to them to decide or not decide. And so by looking at what was actually happening and thinking strategically about it and looking at things historically, I was able to put those 2 together and realize those gaps didn't have strategies, and those strategies should show up in these 3 phases. And so that's how I came to that conclusion. And some of that is a couple of days ago, thinking about specific situations that have taken place recently. at the church? Great question. Real life pastoring, something ain't working right. And realizing, oh, it should have been in the pathway, well, it's not. Okay, great question. Connect. There are 3 steps in the connect phase. And so this is connect in general. Okay, we're building relationship, we're finding community, we're experiencing God. These are the things that are taking place in connect. Where you meet a person or the person meets the church, they engage in activities and they get a deeper connection, which may help them to make a decision. That's generally what's happening in the connect phase. But there are 3 specific steps that I want to highlight. The first step is called the initial connection. And that has happened in 2 different ways: through observation of what takes place at Antioch. One is members engage people in their lives. And the other is people research Antioch and then they come in the door and they don't know anybody. And that initial connection has happened both ways. There are people who walk in the door of Antioch because of a connection they have with a member. But I've noticed there are some people who walk in the door maybe off of reputation, but more than likely off of them looking up. As a matter of fact, I can think of 3 of our recurring guests who got there because they researched us in one of 2 ways. One, they found us through the website. Yay for the website. One, because of the location of the church, and they discovered the church because it was on the bus route. And in both of those scenarios, there was no personal connection at all. They found us. And then on other instances, we've had guests that have come because they had a personal connection outside of the church. And it could be they got there because they researched the church, or maybe they heard of the reputation in the church through somebody, or that could be a personal connection. That could be a non-member personal connection. But I think it all boils down to those 2 ways. We find them or they find us. And both of them happen. So that's initial connection. So disciple makers should be making more personal connections. And being able for people to find us on the web and having a good website that communicates who we are and all this kind of stuff it has its place, because it's been on more than one occasion where I've met a guest. How did you hear about the church? Did you know somebody? Nope. I found you guys. So it's interesting that the initial connection can happen of 1 or 2 ways. And you'd be surprised the number of people who research churches before they go to churches, all because of this little thing called the internet. And so both of them are what makes up the initial connection. That's step one. Either they find us or we intentionally reach out to them. And both happen, and they both need to be acknowledged in the connect phase as step one. Step two is engagement. And that is where they experience God and Antioch through some experience. It could be it could be worship. It could be a community service outing. It could be a discipleship group. It could be one of our systems of care engaging with us through daily Bible reading. And there's some way where they actually hopefully they experience the love of God and the love of Antioch through firsthand experience. That's one way that they engage. Another way is through gospel conversations, individual conversations about faith that happen either through church events or outside of church events. But that's where a person in living out commitments 6 and 7, share my faith with others and care for and disciple others, are being a bold witness for the Lord and sharing their faith with other people and their experience with the church and how that helps them to grow with other people in response to their need. Gospel conversations. And the third way is through digital connection. The Connect card asks for your name and your email address, and you can get connected digitally and receive a host of things. Weekly worship journals, quarterly newsletters, access to our Discipleship Pathway, all of those things are digital engagement. So there's an initial connection, and then there's some actual engagement where they get to experience God and the loving people of Antioch. So that takes it to a deeper level than the initial connection, right? That takes it to a deeper level. And so one of the gaps was there was nothing else there, and people either kept engaging and stopped or decided on their own to join or not join, but there was nothing else to lead them to consider a decision about Jesus' baptism or membership. That was a gap. And I've noticed where we have had returning guests and maybe they stopped and there was nothing in place to guide them to a deeper connection to encourage them to consider a decision. Does that make sense, Dee?
Yes, it does.
So we needed a third step in the connect phase. And that is intentional follow-up. how are we following up with first-time people? How are we following up with returning people? And I can think of any number of people over the past 6 months that were returning guests, and we had a gap of intentional follow-up. And it was up to them to continue to return or make a decision or not. We had nothing in place to guide them. Maybe a conversation, I noticed you've been coming around, and so there are times where I've had intentional conversations with those people, but we need more than just that. So one of the researches that I discovered from another pastor friend of mine suggests that after the initial worship experience, where there should be 7 different connection points, and I mapped out that we do have 7 different connection points for an initial person at worship to be more likely to be a returning person of worship. And maybe I'll share that at another time, but there are 7. And then from a returning person to consider membership, another 5 to 7 points of connection. And we didn't have those. And so we need to create those. So here are the 3 steps in that intentional follow-up, which leads to a potential of 6 different connection points. Number 1, a church presentation. This is for returning guests who may be considering making a decision of membership, and this gives them opportunity to learn more about the church without committing. We've never done this before. This is new, and I'm just taking a step of faith, and we're going to see what happens. This is a church presentation. I call it Antioch at a Glance, where returning guests are invited to participate in a 30 to 45 minute conversation. Kind of fits nicely during the Sunday school hour, or it could be online if necessary. But it gives them an opportunity to understand a little bit more about the church if they're considering a decision. Pretty cool. And then there is this leaders reception, which we have done prior to the pandemic, and we are reviving that. And that is the complete opposite of the church presentation. That's where you learn about the church. The leaders reception is where you're just hanging out with the people. No structure, no agenda. We used to meet over at the Killings household, and we just had food, and there was no agenda. We were just hanging out with returning guests and just hanging. And I think we need both. They need to learn more about the church, and they need to just kind of make connections and just have non-structured time to share life with people so they get to know that we're real people serving the Lord, imperfections and all. And then the third piece is intentional follow-up. And some of that will be digital and some of that will be personal. Meeting people in their initial encounter, following up no later than 48 hours after that experience, and then leading them to a potential next step, a church presentation or a leadership reception. And those are new. The leader reception is bringing back what we shut down during the pandemic. And all of those are designed to lead a person to continue to consider entering into the next phase, which is a commitment to Christ, baptism, or membership. Make sense? Missing piece. And we've had people slide through the cracks of our gap, and we are closing the gap. So there's a new tool called At a Glance. And here it is. This conversation with returning guests is centered around giving an overview at the church so that they can kind of see at a glance. And there's no doubt in my mind that there are probably 6, 7, 8 people who could look at this chart in 2 minutes and be able to communicate Antioch at a glance through those boxes. The organization of the church, we're founded in 1991, predominantly African American, approximately 75 members. We believe a healthy church is missional, transformational, and hey, I just said that at the beginning of our lesson tonight. Imagine that. Isn't that crazy? The mission, vision, and values of the church. I couldn't write out the whole mission statement in that block, so I just had to give it abbreviated because of space. Our affiliations and distinctives. We're a member of the New Era Baptist State Convention. We're a member of the National Baptist Convention USA Incorporated. And one of our distinctions at Antioch is that we try to integrate care and growth and technology, and we try to do those things well, as we believe those things help us do what God called us to do in the age in which we live in. We've got ministries. I wanted to communicate them in light of our mission. We've got disciple-making ministries. We got support ministries. And serving in a support ministry does not get you off the hook from not being in a disciple-making ministry, which is a whole nother Bible study. Antioch Ubuntu is important to us. That's our care structure. 7 commitments is how we help people to grow maturely while they're functioning in those care systems. We talk about mutual expectations in our yearly theme. And that is Antioch at a glance. Gives people a deeper connection as they may be considering membership. You'll notice we're not talking about the beliefs of the church at this point in time. That is a membership conversation. But if they're interested in those beliefs, we can answer those questions. But usually people are not making decisions. This is a Baptist church, and there are some assumptions about biblical beliefs when you enter in a Baptist church and you listen to Baptist preaching and teaching. And so that's the at a glance conversation. And they'll literally get that piece of paper that they can take home with them after that conversation. Thoughts, questions about the at a glance conversation? Do you see how it could potentially help people who may be considering membership to get that type of information before deciding to join?
Yes. Going back to this at a glance, is this something you're going to hand out? Are we giving these to visitors? I didn't catch what you.
Well, so it kind of looks like this. Somebody will approach them. It could be me. It could be what I'm about to talk about next. About how we follow up. And if there's a recurring guest, at some point there's a conversation about, hey, I noticed you've been a returning guest, and I don't know where you are in your thought processes about maybe considering us for membership, but here's an opportunity to learn a little bit more about the church and help you to make that decision. We're going to have a at a glance conversation next Sunday. It'll last about 30 to 45 minutes. We'll have some punch and juice, and we'll have a 45-minute conversation and share with you a little bit more information about the church. We'd love for you to join us. That's what that looks like. And if we were big and we had guests popping in all over the place, we would say this conversation is every second and fourth Sunday during Sunday school. But since we're not big and popping like that, we'll do it as we have returning guests. So that's kind of what that looks like in my mind. Hey, I noticed you've been coming. I want to invite you to this at a glance conversation. We'll share a little bit more information about the church, and maybe that'll help you in your thought processes regarding the possibility of membership. It'll last about 45 minutes. We'll have some red punch, some nuts and mints, like good Baptists do. And then we'll talk through these talking points, and we'll give them this sheet. And at the end, we'll say something like, you could continue to come and not be a member. If you have any specific questions, if you want a meeting with the pastor to talk about something more confidential, or after this, you may decide that Antioch isn't for you. And that's kind of how the conversation would end. It's kind of a no pressure deal, but it helps them to decide whether or not they want to take a next step or not. So if they've had an initial connection, if they've had an experience, and then they've had some follow through, so they would do that. They would have an informal leadership reception, and there's a person that's kind of guiding them through that process of these follow-ups. That's what follow-up looks like. And so we need a couple of people to consider being follow-up contact people at the church. Their job is to make contact during the guest's initial visit. Their job is to follow up with them within 48 hours. Their job is to guide them toward a next step, which could be a leader reception, at a glance conversation. And their job is to help them to do the connect card so they can be digitally connected. And all of that connect activity helps people to be spiritually seen, helps them to be relationally connected, and helps them to be ready for a deeper commitment, should they choose to. And that is Connect at Antioch. Alma says, happy to hear a full planning in place. I see the other one. I don't want to put it on the screen because I don't want to share their names, but yes. To what you said, Alma, yes. Those people would be ideal people as returning guests for an at-a-glance conversation, a leader reception, and some individual follow-up with a Antioch follow-up guide, which results in people being seen, relationally connected, and ready for the next phase to consider committing to Christ, to baptism, and to membership. That is addressing our gap and having a flow that leads people from here to there. What do people say? Thoughts, questions, comments? Does the connect phase make sense?
Yes, it makes sense. And follow up is so important. So it's great for us to be adding that step in, because you're right. It helps people to be seen and connected and know that we have a plan, next steps.
Yes. We do. Let's see. Alma says, "Amen." So yes, the pathway was in place, but we had a gap, and now we're trying to address those gaps. And so we need a couple of individuals to be those follow up people. To do those things. Meet them during their initial visit, follow up within 48 hours, guide them toward the next step. The next step could be a connect card, it could be a at a glance conversation, it could be the leader reception. Whatever next step those people are willing to take. And once they get to those next steps, then each of those next steps can say, hey, what do you think? Leading them toward a decision to make a commitment. And so everybody's involved or ought to be involved in the connect phase. We ought to be involved in making new connections. We ought to prepare the church so that people can research us. Alma says that could be done through the diaconate. The follow-up, it could be, but what if we engaged people who are not already in a leadership role in the church to consider being these follow-up people? And we got more people engaged in disciple-making activity. There are people at the church who are not in leadership that could be engaged, and their job would be to make initial contact, follow up within 48 hours, and guide them toward a next step. So I don't want to just load up more stuff on people who are already doing a lot. I want to bring in people. This is a role that does not require the same level of spiritual maturity as a diaconate person. Any informed and caring member of the church could play the role of the follow-up contact person. And we could have one or two, and they could rotate. I don't know. I mean, those things can be worked out, but it's a simple role. You just got to do three things. Meet them during their visit, follow up within 48 hours, guide them toward the next step if they're willing. So next week we will talk about the decide phase and what those things are. You saw the new tool, the Antioch at a glance, and the digital connection card. Since it's digital, it's on the website. But when they sign it, all you need is first, last name, and email address. That's it. And you receive digital communication, and you can connect with us digitally as well as the other methods of engaging and connecting. So that's pretty much it for the connect phase. We know what's happening. There's just 3 different steps that are happening in the connect phase, and we got some new strategies to help fill our gaps. We got a new tool. We need a couple of new people so that we can do that, and hopefully we can result in more people being seen, more people being connected, more people ready for a deeper commitment. And my goal is for as many people in the Antioch Baptist Church to know everything about our pathway, because it's not my pathway, it's our pathway. And everybody needs to know what's the next step. So next week, we'll look at the next phase, coming out of the connect phase, coming into the decide phase. And then the week after that, we'll look at the last phase, which is the grow phase. And there'll be some other gaps that take place, and there'll be a couple of new tools, a pretty exciting one that I'm looking forward to sharing with you guys. A pretty simple tool to help people to plan to grow and not just willy-nilly grow. We want to be intentional about that. So that's where we're at. That's where we're going. Some of this is the same. We've got kind of taken it to a different level. We've addressed our gaps. We've got 3 steps for each phase, and we know what we're doing, why we're doing it, and how we're doing it. So we'll add the next phase next week, and we'll talk about commitment to Christ, commitment to baptism, and commitment to membership. So you already know the 3 steps in the decide phase. That one was the easiest one out of all 3 to do. All right. So that's all I got for this evening. And there are only 2 kinds of people in the world: people who know Jesus and people who don't know Jesus. And we have something to offer each group of people. So let's go change the world.